Inflation continues to harm American households across the country. In fact, the Bureau of Labor Statistics has released new data showing just how deep the problem is. Now, the reasons for inflation should also be addressed, and corporate greed has a lot to do with it. And we'll get to that in a bit, so hold tight. First, let me give you the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They find this, that the inflation hit another 40-year high as the consumer price index jumped 7.9% in the past year. Increases for food, gasoline, and shelter contributed the most to inflation, with gas prices increasing 6.6% and accounted for nearly a third of all items' monthly increase. Now, the index for food has also increased by 1% according to this data, while the food at home index increased 1.4%, with both being the biggest increase since April of 2020. And keep in mind, this news comes as we have learned more about increases in wages. Like, that's something that some of these corporations try to celebrate, but wages have not kept up with inflation. The news comes despite the fact that the United States added 678,000 jobs in February and wages jumped 5.1%. Now, the fact of the matter is, these corporations seem to have taken full advantage of the inflation hysteria, the inflation narrative in the press to just jack up their prices to bolster their profits, even if they don't need to do it, even if there's no problem with supply chain shortages or supply chain issues. So the top 30 companies, for instance, in the major industry categories of the Consumer Price Index have raised prices while collectively boosting their profits by $151 billion, and that's according to a watchdog group known as Accountable US. The three biggest firms in the food at home category, Walmart, Kroger, and unfortunately Costco as well, saw their net incomes rise a combined $238 million. Grocery prices were up 8.6% in February compared with the previous year, the Bureau of Labor Statistics announced on Tuesday. And what do they do with these profits, folks? Do they use these profits to help out their employees with the inflation that they're causing by just arbitrarily increasing prices? No, of course not. They don't do that at all. What they do is pay themselves again further by buying shares of their own stocks. So the companies also bought back an additional $28 billion of their own shares, a strategy to boost the stock price, which also happens to boost executive compensation because they own shares of the company themselves. I should also note that the board for Amazon has just approved another $10 billion in corporate stock buybacks. So that's what they do with the profits after they increase prices following all of these headlines about inflation.
Okay, guys, so let me explain who's responsible for inflation. When you look at the margins, you see the clear answer, and you'll be able to see it for yourself. So you see inflation going up, depending on the quarter, 6 to 8%, right? So one of the most, well, actually the most recent quarter that we have information for is the fourth quarter of last year. And so for the S&P 500, those are the top 500 companies, what was their profit margin? Now this is important because, hey, listen, if it turns out that inflation's at 8%, but their profit margins are down at Walmart and those giant companies, and so they're passing on some of the price increases to you guys, but they're also taking a hit and their profit margins have gone down, right? Then you would say, hey, inflation is a real problem for everybody and businesses are just responding to supply and demand, right? No, their profit margins are up. And last quarter, they were up to 22%. 22% for the top companies in the world and in America, that's a giant profit margin. And the profit margins didn't go down, they went up. In fact, I'm gonna read you a quick summary from near the end of last year from Reuters, one of the most established news organizations. They say, US companies have retained strong profit margins through the pandemic because they have cut costs and passed along high prices to customers. So corporations maximize profit. That's what they do, period. Anyone who tells you otherwise is a child. And so they saw this opportunity. They're like, look, no one's holding us accountable because of the macroeconomic forces, because of quantitative easing having put tons of money into the economy and into those particular companies. Well, what we can do is we can actually cut our costs and raise prices.
Yep.
And our margins will be literally record-breaking. That's what Reuters was reporting. Record-breaking profit margins.
Yep.
So it is an indisputable fact that the prices are higher because companies are making decisions to take advantage of this situation, not share the pain, but double the pain on you guys.
Yes.
They then ironically send their lobbyists to go tell the politicians that they own all of the Republican Party and unfortunately a decent chunk of the Democratic Party to go out there and tell you guys, oh, your wages went up too much. That's why there's inflation. You know what? We can't do child tax credit. We can't do all these things that would help your family because of inflation. I mean, look at that monstrous lie, right? They take advantage of the inflation to increase your prices, and then they use their greed to ironically argue you shouldn't get anything more.
So don't worry, the Biden administration is aware of what's going on, and Biden has taken action already. He has wagged his finger and he told them to cut it out.
Oh wow, that should be really effective.
But honestly, look, what would Biden do? I'd love to know. Like, what could Biden unilaterally do?
Well, look, here's a couple of things here. First of all, tell the truth, it makes a giant difference.
It does, true.
Okay, now when I tell you that the profit margins are up 22%, and I explain these simple business and economic facts, you guys get it, right? It's not that complicated. And so now, and a lot of people see it because we're a relatively large show, right? But imagine if the president said it or Jen Psaki said it and they showed you these giant graphics showing how, and they named names of different companies and they shamed them. Now you say, look, that's not the best option, right? But it's a lot better than nothing, right? And so what that would do is that would create pressure on Walmart and all these other companies that are jacking up the prices, and it would call them out and it would get everybody angry. Oh, it turns out the prices are up not because of macroeconomic forces, but because those companies decided to take advantage of those forces to rob us blind at a time that we need it most. And then he would argue, as we do here, no, it's not the time to cut from the American people. And at Walmart and all your goddamn lobbyists, and I'm just picking on Walmart, but there's 500 companies, they're all doing the same thing, okay? Because their job is to maximize profit, get it through your thick skulls. Like the reporters are they're just so depressingly unintelligent and uninformed. They can't tell any of this stuff. They repeat those corporate talking points and the lobbyist talking points like puppets. There's just so sad. That's why I gave you the Reuters report, because every once in a while, the truth breaks out, because they're like, well, it is true that their profit margins are at record numbers, right? Now, but they don't connect it back to, hey, wait a minute, when we talk about inflation, it was clearly, obviously, the corporations that did it, right? So if the president does it, it makes a big difference. And then he could say, you know what, I'm passing these bills. You wanna stop money going to people's kids? Because you know what, if they're having trouble keeping up with the prices, then we could help them through the government by giving them a child tax credit, right? And instead they're saying, they're arguing the opposite. And they're letting Manchin run the entire country. And the Manchin is a corporate prostitute.
Totally.
He just does whatever his donors tell him. And Biden doesn't have the courage or the morals to call out Manchin for who he is.
100%. And so what we're really seeing here is a wide scale, what we experienced in the very beginning of the pandemic with people buying up all of the toilet paper and then selling it on eBay for insane prices, right? Price gouging people. Imagine and remember how infuriating that was. Now you have corporations doing it on like a broad level. It's just, it's gross.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.